Hi, good morning. JJ Stewart here. Today I'm going to do a video on how to plot and outline your erotic novel. Some of you are experts at this, some of you are just starting and kind of wondering what's different between an erotica novel or short story and regular fiction. Well, I'm going to tell you there's quite a bit. And I'm going to give you the official JJ Stewart method of outlining and plotting an erotic story. It's a bit too long for a title, so I'll think of something incredibly witty and use that instead. So, grab your coffee, grab a notepad. Feel free to take notes while you watch the video. You can pause it. And yeah, today you're going to learn the secrets of writing erotica. Ooh, that's a good title. I should use that one. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so we got the JJ Stewart method for plotting an erotic story. The first step is deciding what do you want to write. I know it seems silly, but it's important to pick one or two things, be it, we call them kinks. So one or two of them, and you can find a list of kinks on Google or any kind of erotica site. There's plenty of kinks, too many to list here, but pick one or two that will blend well together. Sometimes you can have just one, but oftentimes one will complement another one, so try to pick two. Okay, why? Because most consumers of erotica are searching for one kink that turns them on. And what's the point of erotica? It's to give people mental stimulation, to help them enjoy themselves. That's basically the purpose of your story, is to write something that turns people on and helps them with certain things in their life. Okay, you know what I mean. Dirty stories help people, masturbate. So there you go, I said it. So it could be spanking or chastity belts, first-time virgins, bondage sex, hot wives, cheating, and so forth. So try to pick two. Now, how do you pick? I often ask this question, like, how do you know what to write? And it was told to me that basically write what turns you on. So what do you like to read? I write a lot of hot wife stories where the husband is somewhat put in a cuckold position, forced to watch another man and his wife having sex. And it's just a personal fantasy of mine. I just find strong women kind of attractive, and it's a power dynamic that I like the most. But some guys like a submissive wife, so if that works for you, then write a story with a submissive wife or girlfriend. Or it could be something completely different. It could be, the first time someone experiments with bondage. It could be a really good story. So basically pick that, something that works for you, and start there. Later on, when you get more experience or a couple publications on your belt, you can start writing different things, expand a little bit. But for now, if you're beginning and this is your first erotica novel, pick something that works for you. Now, the second thing to consider is how long do you want your story to be? Depending on the length of the story will determine what aspects you need to plan and plot for. Obviously, shorter stories require a lot less, while middle and longer stories require a lot more. So decide ahead of time. If you're new to this, again, I suggest a short story, or if you're feeling adventurous, try even a short novella. For these lessons, I'm just going to assume that one page equals 250 words. It's just an easy calculation. Doesn't matter really how many words, the size of the font, but as long as you have about 250 words, that's about a page. So a short story for a beginner writer should be anywhere between 12 to 28 pages. It seems like a lot to write, but it's not really. Once you see all the aspects you have to put in, it's not that hard to fill up these pages. And I've often written a short story that turned into a short novella that accidentally became a long novella, and it's like, oops. So these aren't, set in stone. You don't have to have exactly 12 pages. You can have 10 pages, or you can have 30 pages and still call it a short story. But these are just guidelines. So decide how long of your story do you want to write? And again, if this is your first one, I would suggest just working on a short story. Okay, the third step is pick a cast of characters. Maybe you have a picture in your mind of what your character will look like, or maybe you don't. So when you add a character, create a cast list on the side. Make sure you list their names, their age, the sex, occupation, any character traits they have, and a physical description. I say this because sometimes if you're writing a series, you might accidentally have a character with blue eyes in the first book suddenly have brown eyes in the second book. And this just helps you keep your work consistent, and continuity is an important thing. Some of these characteristics you'll reveal in your story, such as their age, a physical description, and so on. And the other parts might be just a reference for you, so that you can tell them apart and know who's who. So if a character reveals something like that she's a waitress, make sure you put that in your list. If she has a special tattoo, make sure you make a note of it so that you can come back to it later. And referring to it later on might help make that character more alive, because the reader will go, oh, I remember she had a tattoo. Yeah, that's right. And it just makes the story a little bit more believable. And basically why is because of continuity. Nothing ruins a reader's experience more than having eye colors change, or learning the waitress in book 1 is a librarian in book 2, and the notes help you remain consistent. And again, especially if you're writing a series. So, a couple tips for creating characters. First one, don't use celebrities. I know it's tempting, but don't. These are people who will object to being put in your stories, and so just don't do it. And also, on the same note, don't describe your character as, looks like Brad Pitt, or George Clooney, or Emma Watson, or something like that. Instead, describe the person. You can describe Brad Pitt if you want. Just don't call him Brad Pitt. Let your reader make the connection. Go, you know what? This guy sounds a lot like Brad Pitt. That's kind of working for me. One suggestion I often get, and I've used this myself, is use a girlfriend, wife, or co-worker as a template in your story. Why? Because you already know this person. You know their looks, and you can easily plop them into your story and get down to writing. So someone you think is sexy and you already know, use their name and physical description in draft 1, because it can help that way, just to keep it alive for you. But remember in draft 2 to change that person's name, because you don't want your best friend finding out they're in a story, or a co-worker or something, or your wife, unless you like to be in trouble. So I always use my wife's name and description in my stories, just about every single one, and then at the end I'll change the name, change the description. But that just works for me, because hell, I have a hot wife and it works. So I write about my wife in these situations, and for me it makes the story more alive, more engaging, and much more fun to write. But I always change the name, because I'm not a stupid man. The summary so far: you've picked your kink, or perhaps two kinks blended together, such as spanking or first-time virgins, and you know the length you want to write, and you've created a list of characters. Now we're ready to start outlining. Yay! This is the fun part. Now that we've done all that, let's create our GMC. And no, I'm not talking about the truck. Our goal, motivation, and conflict list. For each character you have in your story, you need to have their goal, their motivation, and a conflict. This will help later on when you're deciding your scenes and giving characters a believable motivation for what they're doing. So basically, write down their name. So let's just start with Karen. Her name's Karen. What does Karen want? So you have to write down Karen, and then her goals. Her goal might be to seduce an older man, or have an affair, or try bondage for the first time. So reveal this to your readers early on. Usually this is in the opening with your main character. Reveal the goal of what he or she wants. And then, along the same notes, you want to include the motivation. Why? Why does she want to do that? A cheating wife story, you'll need a story of why. Why does she want to cheat? You don't just do it for the sake of it. So give them a somewhat plausible reason. Maybe her husband's cheated on her and she wants revenge. Or maybe she's bored and she just wants more out of life. Or, for whatever reason you can come up with. Give your character a motivation. And lastly, the conflict. What force or person will be preventing it? So for our cheating wife story, maybe the husband's preventing it. She can't have an affair with him watching her, so she needs to get away somewhere private. Perhaps the person she wants to have an affair with is reluctant. Maybe her best friend is against it and is trying to talk her out of it. It could be any kind of reason, but give them a conflict, because most stories are boring if there's no conflict. So you got your characters, what's their motivation, and what's their conflict. And just jot this down for yourself, and it'll help you as a reference point when you're creating your scenes. Okay, here's my outline for Humiliated and Denied. This is my 5th book in my submissive training series. You remember we did a video, well, I did a video, you watched it hopefully, on creating an ebook and turning it into a paperback. Well, I've continued the series. I have 4 books out now, and this is the 5th one. And so I'm going to just outline how I am about to write this. Most of this isn't as formal as you see it here. I usually just scribble it down on a notepad. But for ease of learning, I've put it on the big screen for you. So, first of all, what do I want to write? Well, I want to write the continuation of the series. And this time, I've picked my 2 kinks, is humiliation and chastity. Now, humiliation's been a theme I've ran through the entire series, and that's kind of the thread that keeps all the books together. And in each different book, I'll explore a different extra topic. For example, spanking, one was oral sex, one was backdoor action. I don't know how else to say that. And this one is going to be on chastity. And I've just worked it that each book has humiliation and an extra kink in it. And how long will I want this one to be? I'm thinking about 40 pages, so about 10,000 words. So it's just a little bit, well, I guess it's a small novella. I mean, it's not really a short story, but it's a bit longer, but it's definitely not a novel. So I've created my cast of characters. I have Sandra, Grant, Thomas, Karen, and Hugh. And for this, my main characters, I need to do my GMC for them. So I've gone ahead and done that. So Sandra, my main character, her goal is cheating on her husband with Grant. She wants intimacy with the man she is cheating with, Grant, and she wants to be his submissive. So in this story, she will be locked in a chastity belt for the first time, and her goal is to please Grant and be permitted an orgasm. Her motivation, well, she's already humiliated herself in the previous books, doing the tasks and initiations that Grant has given her. So she feels she's too invested now to stop. But she will have self-doubt. But right now she's like, I've gone this far, I want to experience it all. So she continues on. She wants to experience everything Grant offers before her husband discovers her affair. So that's a recurring theme, that she's worried about being discovered. She's worried about the consequences, but she's just having too much fun, and she's enjoying herself. So she wants to pass his tests in order to become a fully trained submissive. And her conflict, of course, is she feels guilt cheating on her husband. Not a lot, but she does feel it from time to time. And she has self-doubt that she can please Grant. Grant seems to be content to string her along, and she wonders, will she ever be considered a submissive in the fetish community? And she also, I didn't write this down, but she also looks at Karen with a bit of envy, because Karen's younger and more pretty, and this, works on the whole humiliation thing. Who wants to, sleep with a frumpy housewife? But that's just her self-image. She doesn't think she's that beautiful, but she's a pretty hot girl. So we come to Grant. So Grant, the next main character, His goal is to enjoy Sandra and fulfill his deepest, darkest fantasies with her. He wants to keep her, keeps giving her tasks because he enjoys how hard she works to pass them. And he kind of wants to keep Sandra as a play toy, not really committing any feelings towards her. So his motivation is what? I revealed in a previous book that his wife wants nothing to do with the fetish lifestyle. So this is basically his first chance. Oh, I spelled the word wrong. Just happened to notice that. This is his first chance to have a submissive woman fulfill his sexual desires. So he's really enjoying himself in this story, and he's motivated to keep on keeping on. He doesn't need to change. He's got a girl who's doing everything he wishes, and he's fulfilling his fantasies. But he does have conflict. His conflict is he defers to Hugh, his friend, and Thomas, who's a legend in the fetish world. I just made that up. I don't know if that's true. So he's too fearful of upsetting them. Thus he stands by while Hugh and Thomas use Sandra's body instead of him, and it bothers him. So even though he's, just a main character, I've given him conflict, and that will work in the story to make the characters more alive. And now for the minor characters, I just list them for you guys. I already have them on notes. So John, he's the husband to Sandra. He's currently a long-haul trucker out of the story for 3 weeks, making a delivery to California. I'm going to use him in the next book, but not in this one. So for right now, I need to get him out of the way, and what better way to do that than send him on a 3-week trip. So John's gone. Bye, John. Next, Thomas. That's Sandra's creepy next-door neighbor. Originally, she thought he was just a creepy guy who was spying on her because he used to watch her out of the window when she was outside. But it turns out, surprise, surprise, in the last book, that he's not the creepy neighbor. He's actually a celebrity in the fetish community, and he has the hots for Sandra. Now, Hugh is the best friend of Grant, I already mentioned. He also takes an interest in Sandra. I didn't write this down, but he likes her because she's a bit more jiggly. She's got a bit more hip meat on her. She's got nice big boobs and wide hips, and he's kind of interested in that because his own submissive Karen is a bit of a string bean, kind of a teenage-looking girl, but so he's finding Sandra quite interesting as well. So yeah, Karen brings us to Karen. Karen is the much younger, prettier girl. She's also a co-worker with Sandra, and she is fully trained. She's a submissive to Hugh, but she also has sex with Grant many times, and that creates great conflict because it makes Sandra jealous. Grant doesn't mind. He's just loving it, but it just works in creating more tension. So she's a source of jealousy and envy for Sandra. So now I have that. All this I already had kind of written down in my notes, but I put it on the page here for you guys to see. So there's the outline. Now we're ready to do the 3-act structure. So I will plot that out, and I'll be right back. Okay, guys, I bet you weren't expecting a 3-act structure for an erotica book, but it is possible. Now, I'm going to say one thing first. For a short story, you don't really need a 3-act structure at all. It's just, get 2 characters together, have them do something, end of story. Readers of this kind of stuff, the really short stories, they're not really interested in character development or plot or anything. They just want that certain kink, and they want to see it now. So for mine, I've decided on my 3-act structure, the book's going to be called Humiliated and Denied. Decided I'm going to do 40 pages, so about 10,000 words, and I'm going to have it set up into 3 acts. Act 1 will be 30%, Act 2 40%, and Act 3 about 30%. I should add that up. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, good. It adds up to 100. So Act 1 of any kind of book, any novella or erotica short, is going to be setting the table. If it's a series, you're going to be reintroducing the standard characters. So you might do a quick recap, just kind of describing who's who, maybe some key features. But if this is a standalone, For me, this is my 5th book in the series, so I'm doing a continuation. But if this was just a standalone, I've decided to write this today type of thing, then the first act would be introducing the characters. You want to, have their characteristics, height, weight. Well, maybe not weight, but if they're got any just like tattoos, the profession, and I call this setting the table. So you're setting up the very first scene. Act 2, I always consider it's a bit of a flop because you have your characters, they have their goals, motivation, desires. So their goal is to achieve something. Maybe they try and they kind of fail. There's something in the way. Maybe they want to give up and so forth. This is the meat of the book is in Act 2. Act 3, this is where our hero tries again. They overcome whatever obstacle it was. Remember, an antagonist doesn't have to be a person. It can be a force or a situation, something working against their goals and interests. And of course, then you have the climax of the story and the conclusion. And I always like to leave a little bit of room, maybe like a hook or door to the next book, so that the reader, if you're doing a series, finishes your book and you're kind of hinting at, hey, this is what's coming next. And that just whets their appetite a bit. And if you've already published your next book, then they can instantly go look for it because you'll have it in your back matter, your promo material that you put at the end of every ebook. If you don't know about that, I have a video on that. Might want to watch that. It's a great tool. So you give them the hook at the end, teasing them about the next book, and then you have it right there in your table of contents, in your clickable back matter. So that's this, and now I'm going to give you a quick outline for this book. This is my 5th book in the series, and I'm going to show you now what it looks like. Now I know for this story I'm going to have 4 main sex scenes. I've just decided that based on 40 pages, so it's about 1 sex scene for every 10 pages, which is pretty standard. Some people have, 1 sex scene for every 5. But my scenes end up lasting a few pages, and by the time you set it up and then think about it and feel about it after, it runs to about 10 pages each. So I know ahead of time that I'm going to have 4 major sex scenes, so I'm going to write them down now. And they're not just random. They each have a purpose. So I know ahead of time that I want to explore the humiliation and denial for Sandra. That's what's happening in this book. So I'm planning the 4 sex scenes. With this in mind, I'll jot down her character arc through the story with, 4 major sex scenes. So each one, it's a struggle until the final scene. So scene 1, she's unsure she likes this chastity belt. She begs for an orgasm and is denied. Grant wants to teach her that she cannot beg, but must wait until he gives permission to her. So that's scene 1. So I'm going to work that in somewhere. Scene 2, she's even more aroused and frustrated now, and she can't even pleasure herself. She begs one last time, and Grant again teaches her that she must not beg. He denies her again, and instead he has sex with Karen, while Sandra is forced to watch. So you can see how she wants something, but she's being denied it. She wants it even more. She's still denied it. And furthermore, she's even punished. So in scene 3, Sandra has learned her lesson. She's not going to beg. And she redoubles her efforts to be obedient to Grant. And he's pleased. She's not begging. And that's supposed to be a W, sorry. And now tells her she must earn the privilege. So I'm going to create a scene where she has to earn it. And I'm thinking perhaps give you-know-whats to 3 men she doesn't know while blindfolded. I'm thinking of a test. So that's just what came to mind. So I wrote that down. And then, of course, the final scene. Sandra is extremely aroused and frustrated. She has stopped begging. She has done the humiliating task from the last scene, whatever that turns out to be. And Grant finally removes the chastity device. And, after she satisfies him, he permits her to finally climax, which is her goal the whole entire book. So, of course, she has a mind-blowing climax, realizes it's all worth it. She loves being a submissive. And the scene ends with intimacy she wants. as she lies in Grant's arms. So I'm going to have, these are the 4 major sex scenes. I might have smaller ones, but these are the ones that are going to be based on her character arc, because I know from her goal, motivation, and conflict that this is what she wants. So that ends up looking like this. Act 1. So this is basically how I'll plot it out. I have the scene, so the setting's at Sandra's house on the couch with Grant. And I just basically cut and pasted 1, 2, 3, 4 into each scene, so I don't have to type this out twice. So I just cut and paste that and pasted it here. And this is what I came up with. Sandra is wearing the chastity belt and is already feeling the urge to climax. She is excited to finally have some alone time with Grant, and after watching a romantic movie, she wants some snuggles. Grant reveals he isn't staying the night. His wife's flight is delayed, so he'll be spending the night with her. So I just came up with this. So Sandra is upset and asks to have an orgasm, but Grant refuses. He tells her that she needs to put her sexual desires aside and can only climax when he thinks she deserves it. So that's a little bit of a stunner for her. So she goes to bed alone and frustrated and tries to use her vibrator, but the chastity belt prevents it. And so she falls asleep, frustrated and alone. So you see, we clearly have her goals, her motivation, and we have the conflict. She's not permitted. So it's like, ugh. So that is Act 1, Scene 1. Now we're still in Act 1, and we're at Scene 2. So this setting is at work Monday morning, so that happened on a Sunday. And now we're at work the next day. And then we're also going to have a lunch scene with Sandra, Grant, Karen, and Hugh. And in these things, I just put down what characters are going to be in the scene, so I know what their motivations are and their goals if I'm ever confused. Okay. I could read all this, but I'll just let you read it right now. So you can see how she is starting. Well, she thinks she's learned her lesson, but she hasn't. She's trying her best to behave and be obedient, which is what Grant wants her to do. And I like this part I added about a waiter. So she's so frustrated and upset that she snaps at the waiter. So I don't know who that'll be, some guy. Maybe she's rude to him or she's snarky with him. And of course Grant objects and calls the waiter back and forces Sandra to apologize. So I'm adding to that humiliation. And then he offers the waiter permission to fondle her. Well, that's just out of the question. But, she feels even more humiliated as the man touches her and she has to thank him for it. So this excites Hugh, who then has her get under the table and, do something, which you can read. So I thought that was a nice touch. And with all these outlines, if something like this happens, like if you're in the middle of writing a scene and it just doesn't seem to be working, feel free to change it. I might get to writing this part and go, nah, that just doesn't work. And I might scrap this whole last part. Or it might be a little different, but don't feel like you're locked into place just because you have an outline. This is just a framework to help me plan and outline it. So I'm not just having a random story about nothing. And now we get into Act 2. So we're on the third scene of the book, and this is going to be the second major sex scene. So she's even more aroused, frustrated, and she cannot pleasure herself even. She begs one last time, which was the mistake, and Grant teaches her that she must not beg and denies her once again. So she's like, frustrated. So he has sex with Karen while Sandra must watch, which I think would be pretty hot. So I'm setting up the scene where she's making supper. She has to, eat off the floor, a dirty plate on the floor. And of course, she does all the cleaning afterwards while Grant and Karen relax. So this is just adding to the humiliation again, and to the fact that she's being belittled, and she's just nothing but, you know, a servant, and no one's giving her any help at all. So then when they retire to the bedroom, she is, I thought, be tied to a 4-post bed, and Karen and Grant will do the you-know-what. And so Sandra's aroused. She can't touch herself. She can't participate. Grant and Karen degrade her. They maybe even spank her. But she does everything she can to not beg. And they're trying to get her to beg, but she won't. She refuses to, even though she wants it more than anything. So I think I can really work with the tension and the dynamic in that. And then finally he has to watch them snuggle and hold each other. The very thing that she wants to do, she can't do it. And so she's left tied up while they, you know, snuggle for a bit. Then they leave the bedroom and go watch a movie. So the whole time she knows they're on the couch in the other room, but she can't move. She's still bound. You know, it's so humiliating and degrading. And then finally, after Karen leaves, maybe Grant plays with her a little more. I don't know, maybe he'll have sex with her or not. I'll kind of leave that open. But the main thing is that when he's done, she sleeps on the floor like a dog cuffed to the bed while he sleeps in her bed. So that just is the final icing on the cake of her humiliation. It's like she can't even sleep in her own bed with the man she wants to sleep with. She has to sleep on the floor, and she can't get up because she's handcuffed to the bedpost. So you can see as each of these scenes unfolds, her desires are denied. You know, the tension rises, and she just wants to have an orgasm like everyone else. So we're into Act 3, final act of the book. So scene 4 of the story is at work on Tuesday, Grant, Karen, and Sandra. I thought I'd have an in-between scene, which is sometimes people call it filler, but I like to just have a little bit of not sex in the erotica story in between. So it's not just one sex scene, one sex scene right after the other. They have some space. So the scene 4, she's unable to suppress her arousal and urge, and she is desperate to please Grant. She even offers him a favor when he wakes up, and she uses all her strength and willpower not to ask for her chastity belt to be removed. She knows if she asks, she'll be denied even longer, so she's finally learned her lesson. So she makes him coffee and breakfast while he showers, and uses all the hot water. So when it's her turn to shower, because of course she doesn't shower before master, she showers when he's done. It's a cold shower. You know, he's used all the hot water, so it's even more frustrating for her. And then at the office, she tries to work at her desk, but her mind is all foggy. You know, all she can think about is sex, and her back aches from sleeping on the floor. So I thought that was just a nice in-between kind of like setup about how the day's going, without actually having to get into any of the nitty-gritty. It just kind of lets you know these people, how they're reacting to what came before. And then scene 5, I'll put the third sex scene in, where she's learned her lesson. She will not beg. She redoubles her efforts to be obedient, and he is pleased. But he tells her she must pass one final test to earn the privilege that she wants. So I have to create a scene where she has to earn it. And I thought about, a couple strangers or something, maybe while she's blindfolded. And I'll probably go with this unless a better idea comes to me during the writing process. So again, remember, you're not tied to this. It's just something to keep you focused. So that night, the scene opens with back at the house. Sorry, I'll scroll up a bit. And they're just alone. It's just the two of them. And she's pleased that Karen's not there. She makes supper, dressed like she always is. He relaxes on the couch with a beer. And he makes a series of phone calls. But he won't tell Sandra who he's talking to. So she serves him dinner on her knees and on the floor while he eats. And like before, she's given the scraps on a plate. But she accepts her role and eats it obediently. Okay. And afterwards, she cleans up when she's finished, and Grant produces a bondage hood. She has to strip down, place the hood on her head, and it blocks out her entire view. She can't see a thing. And when she tries to ask what's happening, he slaps her face or maybe just spanks her. I'm not sure how that'll go. And tells her this is her final test to see if she's worth having the belt removed. And he asks, is she willing to obey him? And of course she says yes. And she can't stop thinking about having an orgasm. So he makes her kneel on the floor facing the front door with her hands cuffed behind her back, and no clothes on except her chastity belt. And a lot of time passes before the first guests arrive, followed by 2 others. So she's nervous and she feels humiliated as they comment on her body. But she's not permitted to speak to them, and she has no idea who these men are. So I think that's a bit of a fantasy some females have, to have men that she has to do this to, and she doesn't even know who they are. Turns out they're friends of Grant's. He's invited over, so that was who he's phone calling on the couch to help him administer her final test. So Grant instructs Sandra to give each man a you-know-what. She can't use her hands, and she must not stop until finished. So this is quite an effort. Because remember from book 1, she doesn't even like doing this. She doesn't feel that she's good at it. So it's one of the humiliating things he makes her do. So she does it, and by the end her jaw is aching and her mouth tastes funny, but she's done it. And she thinks she's finished, but the men stay and have a couple beers, then they talk, and she has to remain kneeling. So this further humiliates her. It's degrading. She's not treated like a human being, and she can't get up until they leave. And even a few of them might snap pictures of her before they leave. So that's that scene. And then we have the conclusion of the book, the final scene. So we're still at Sandra's house. So when the last man leaves, Grant finally removes her hood and the cuffs, and she's exhausted, but he tells her he's proud of her, and she likes that. She's finally passed. So he takes the hood off, unlocks the belt, leads her to the bedroom where they have, a good time, and she has the most intense orgasm of her life. And the book ends with her contently resting in his arms. So there's no more sleeping on the floor, no more tests, no more humiliation and denial. She's finally become his submissive, and she is happier than ever. So the story ends with a hint of the next book, where I'll deal with the humiliation of lactation. This was mentioned at the end of the previous book. So I'm bringing back that theme. Grant wants to talk about starting her on hormone therapy to make her, even bigger. And Sandra doesn't care because she's passed all the tests. She's put so much time and effort into it. She'll accept anything he wants to do to her. And she's in love with him. She realizes that as she snuggles into him and falls asleep. Remember, this is a married woman, so, she's fallen in love with the man she's having an affair with. And the book ends with Grant smiling and maybe stroking her blonde hair and kind of fade to black. So, I don't know if my final edit will turn out to be like this, but this is how I plot it out. So, I know it seems like a lot of work, but it keeps you on track. And it gives you an outline and a structure to follow. I can deviate. There's no law saying I have to finish it completely the way I wrote it down. But if I kind of keep to the outline I made, then the story will make sense. Characters will have an arc. We can see their goal, motivation, and conflict. Where was that up here? Yeah. So we can see the goals and the motivation, the conflict. If each character is realized, Sandra being the main character, it's her point of view story. You can see she finally gets it. And I showed you the steps of the 3-act structure. And I use these 4 scenes to do her arc on. So where we start to where we finish. So this is her goals. Wants it, is denied. She wants it, she denies. And then how she redoubles her efforts, almost decides to give up, but presses on, and then the final scene where she overcomes the adversity and she wins his approval and is happily ever after. So that is how to plot. And I hope it's helpful and wasn't too long. And hit subscribe. Now stay tuned for some bloopers. How to what? How to... Oh God, this is why I need notes. What am I doing today? I had it a second ago. What was it? Today I'm going to... Okay, start again. So, our summary so far. You have to pick your... blah, blah, blah.